The light coming from the top of the well was weak. At night it disappeared completely. The sound of the city outside was a distant echo, muffled by the earth and fear. Aline, just 22, clutched a dirty t-shirt to her chest, trying to keep the cold at bay. How many days had it been? 7, 10 days, 12? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that she was still alive. Alive, but invisible, as she had always been. When the firemen finally found her, her body was dehydrated, bruised, but her gaze carried an old pain from long before the fall. While everyone celebrated the miracle of the rescue, Aline remained silent because she knew the real pit was outside. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here, you'll find real and intense stories that few have the courage to tell. Be part of this community that feels, reflects, and overcomes together. 5 new episodes a week. Don't miss out. The next story could change your life. Aline grew up learning to keep quiet. At home, every misstep was punished with silence or contempt. Her father, an absent and bitter man, barely looked her in the eye. Her mother, submissive and tired, lived in corners, avoiding conflict. Aline was the middle child, the one nobody noticed. At school, she was no different. Intelligent but withdrawn, she had an easy time with books, but none with people. Her words always seemed to get stuck in her throat. She spent recess drawing by herself, creating worlds where she was heard, where she was seen. At 18, she tried to leave home, but without support or money, she returned weeks later, defeated. She started working in a neighborhood market, packing groceries and answering with a rehearsed smile. The real world was no less cruel than the house she lived in. Aline's dream wasn't grandiose. She didn't want fame, fortune, or applause. She wanted silence, but good silence, the kind of silence that comes with security, with freedom, with the absence of fear. When she was 21, she began to save money in hiding. Every penny left over from the minimum wage went into a little blue box hidden in the back of her closet. It was her secret, her hope, a small studio in the center, a place where she could wake up and hear only the sound of her own breathing, where she could walk barefoot without hearing screams, where she could sleep without her heart racing. That was the plan. While working at the market, she spent hours imagining the simple furniture she would have, the plants in the window, the books she would read sitting on the floor. And she dreamed of studying psychology. She wanted to understand why certain pains get stuck in the soul, why some people hurt others so much. She started taking short online courses in the evenings, even though she was exhausted. The flame inside her was growing. She was, for the first time, building something of her own, but what she didn't know, or refused to see, was that her freedom bothered her a lot. Her stepfather, a tough, controlling man, started asking too many questions. "You're hiding money to run away, are you?" he asked one night, in a tone that was half laugh, half threat. Her mother looked down, and so did Aline. She didn't say anything. That night she cried in silence, for the lack of protection, for the lack of a voice. Even so, she didn't give up. There were only 2 months left to get the initial rent and deposit. She had already looked at apartments online. She had even saved her favorites. But then, everything changed. One sultry Sunday, she decided to leave the house early, unannounced. She needed some air, space. She went for a walk in a vacant lot near the old train tracks, a place she used to go as a child. It was the only place where he could hear his own thoughts. And it was there, in that space of freedom, that she tripped over a badly sealed concrete lid. She fell, and the world went out. Pain was the first thing she felt. A sharp crack in her leg, followed by a deafening silence. When she opened her eyes, everything was dark, damp and cold. She tried to move, but her right leg wouldn't respond. The air was thick, and the fear was paralyzing. Aline screamed, once, twice, 10 times. No one answered, only the sound of her own echo coming back, as if to mock her. The first few days were confusing. She tried to keep her mind working, to remember where she was, how much time had passed. She had no watch, no cell phone. Only time measured by the cold of the night and the oppressive heat of the day. Food was a problem, because there wasn't any. Water came from the rain that ran down the earthen walls. Aline improvised a container with a plastic bag that had fallen with her. She drank little by little, trying to save money. She ignored the hunger, but the loneliness, that was unbearable. On the 4th or 5th day, she started talking to the emptiness. She made up stories, recalled dialogues from movies, sang softly songs that her mother used to listen to on the radio. Somehow, she tried to stay present, but her mind played tricks on her. One moment she believed someone was coming. The next, she felt she was being punished. She wasn't sure why, for running away, for wanting too much. On the 8th day, she thought about giving up. Her body was weak, her lips cracked, her eyes deep. She cried without tears. Then he heard voices, faint, distant, but real. She screamed with what strength she had left, once, twice, 3 times. Nothing happened. The light faded again, and she knew for sure. She was hallucinating. But 2 days later, the voices came back, closer, and this time someone answered. "Is anyone down there?" Aline shouted back. She cried, laughed, she fainted. On the 12th day, she was rescued by a team of firefighters. Her body was in tatters. Her mind was in shock. When she arrived at the hospital, the story was already in all the local newspapers. Young woman survives 12 days trapped in abandoned well. The media called her a miracle, a survivor, a symbol of strength. But inside her, there was only silence, and a question that kept hammering away. What if I had died there? Would anyone have missed me? Aline left the hospital with her body recovering, but her soul in ruins. The neighborhood wanted to know the details. The newspapers wanted interviews. The family wanted silence. "I've had enough, haven't I?" said her mother when she saw her sitting in the living room, looking lost. "You're alive. Let's move on." But Aline couldn't. The nights were long. The flashes of darkness, cold and loneliness came back without warning. The sound of the lid closing on the well echoed in her head like thunder. She woke up sweating, screaming, not knowing where she was. She tried to talk to her mother. She tried to tell her mother what had really brought her to that place that Sunday. That it wasn't just a walk, that she was running away, that she was afraid of her stepfather, that she could no longer bear the weight of living in that house. Her mother looked at her with hard eyes and said in a low voice, "Don't make it up." From that day on, Aline understood. No one wanted to hear the truth. Her trauma was inconvenient. The version of the heroic survivor who overcame 12 days at the bottom of a well was much more comfortable, more beautiful, more marketable. When the hospital psychologist called to offer free help, she refused, not because she didn't want help, but because she couldn't trust anyone anymore. She tried to go back to work, but the whispers, the stares, the treatment as if she were a tragedy celebrity suffocated her. Within 2 weeks, she resigned. She spent her days locked in her room. She started having panic attacks. Sometimes she'd curl up in the corner of the bathroom, trying to simulate the well space, because it was only there that she felt the world stop spinning. The blue box with the money was still in the cupboard, untouched. But now, it seemed useless. She didn't know where else to go, and deep down she didn't think she deserved to go anywhere. Her stepfather started making acid jokes again. Her mother became increasingly distant. "She's like this because she wants to attract attention," he said. And Aline kept quiet until the day she couldn't sleep and decided to look up her name on the internet. She found forums discussing the case, comments saying that she had made up the story, that nobody survives 12 days like this, that it was all just theater. There, at that moment, Aline really broke down. It wasn't the fall, it wasn't the hunger, it wasn't the fear, it was the abandonment after the pain, the contempt for her truth, the erasure of her very existence. She looked at herself in the mirror, thin, pale, with deep-set eyes and almost no voice. And she thought, maybe I should have died down there. She cried until she had no strength left, and she slept on the bathroom floor, like so many other times. But that morning, something different happened, something subtle, something that would change everything. It was a small detail, almost imperceptible. That morning, lying on the cold floor of the bathroom, Aline woke up to sunlight streaming in through the crack in the window. Her eyes, accustomed to the darkness of the room, narrowed. And there, in a corner of the wall, she saw a small plant growing between the tiles. A tiny, stubborn root pushing against the cement with silent force. She stood there staring at it for minutes. That plant shouldn't have been there. It didn't have soil. It didn't have enough light. It had no reason to exist. But it was still alive. It was the first time in months that Aline felt something other than pain. Over the next few days, she began to notice other little things. The taste of the tea her elderly neighbor brought her. The sound of the rain at dawn. The way the street cat lay in the sun, afraid of nothing, and a memory surfaced. The day she was in the well, almost fainting, and thought that if she survived, she would do everything differently, that he wouldn't let anyone silence his pain again. Maybe it was still possible. If at any point in this story you saw yourself in Aline, take a deep breath and leave a like. It shows that you're here, feeling it together. And if something really touched you, write in the comments. Sometimes sharing your pain is the first step to turning it into healing. He got the number of the psychologist who had offered help. He called. The voice on the other end was calm, firm, welcoming. She didn't say much during the first session, but she cried, and she was heard. For the first time in a long time, she felt that someone saw Aline, and not just the girl from the well. Little by little, she started writing again. She picked up an old notebook and began to write down memories, sensations, and fears. It was as if she was unraveling a ball of yarn inside her. In therapy, she talked about her childhood, about her mother's silence, about the absence of love, about her constant fear, and about the day she fell. She told everything, including what she had never told anyone, that she thought about not leaving, that for a moment she thought it would be easier to die there, forgotten. The psychologist didn't judge. He just listened. And there, in that safe space, Aline began to rebuild something much more important than her routine, her own identity. She understood that she didn't need anyone's permission to tell her story, that the fact that many didn't believe her didn't diminish the truth she carried. The turning point was silent, like the root in the wall. But it was real. The reunion with herself was slow, almost imperceptible at first. But Aline, now 23, was no longer the same silent girl who fell into the well. The pain had left deep scars, yes, but it had also revealed a strength she hadn't known existed. For the first few weeks, she started taking short walks around the neighborhood. She wore headphones, listened to quiet music, and breathed as if each step was an act of resistance. It wasn't about the body, it was about space. She was gradually regaining the right to occupy the world. In therapy, she continued to immerse herself in her memories. Each painful memory was welcomed, understood. She no longer needed to protect herself so much. She began to sleep better. She started eating more regularly again. With every small victory, she felt she was reconnecting with that old flame, the one that never went out, not even at rock bottom. One day, the psychologist suggested that she write down her story, not as an outburst, but as a record of survival, something that could help other people. The idea scared her, but it also provoked her. And so she began. She wrote down every day in the well, every thought, every memory that surfaced. And more than that, she wrote about the aftermath, about the loneliness of being discredited, about the pain of returning to the house that hurt her. Writing became therapy, liberation. Over time, she found the courage to publish short excerpts on an anonymous blog. She didn't expect anything, but the comments started pouring in. People saying, "I felt that way too. I was silenced too. Thank you for writing this." For the first time, Aline felt that her pain wasn't just pain. It was a bridge. She thought again about the idea of studying psychology. She still had no money or stability, but it no longer seemed impossible. She went to the studio she had visited a year earlier. It was still there, still available, and now she had enough to get in. She signed the contract with trembling hands. The first night in her new apartment, she lay on the mattress on the floor with the windows open. The noise from the street was different, but not threatening. It was the sound of life, and she was part of it now. It wasn't a new Aline. She was the whole Aline, with all the parts, the ones that fell, the ones that got up. Despite the progress, Aline's reconstruction was not a straight line. There were relapses, moments when the past came back like a gale, ripping her peace out by the roots. During her second week in the new apartment, a blackout in the neighborhood left her in complete darkness for almost 2 hours. Alone in the absolute dark, she felt panic coming over her like a wave. She was sweating, shaking, and could barely breathe. The memory of the well came flooding back. 12 days turned into 12 seconds in her head. That night, she slept with the lights on, as soon as they came back on. Another relapse came when she tried to visit her mother, months later. She arrived with her heart in her hands, wanting to show that she was fine, that she had won. But the reception was cold. Her mother didn't even look her in the eye. "You made up half those stories, and now you're playing the victim on the internet." Aline didn't answer. She only felt an old emptiness opening up inside her chest. She spent days unable to write, unable to go to therapy. She thought about giving up. She wanted to disappear, but she remembered the root in the wall, the plant that grew in the impossible. She went back to therapy. She talked about the meeting. She cried, but she didn't shut down. She learned to name what she was feeling: pain, grief, anger. She learned that reconstruction also means accepting that some wounds don't close completely, but they do heal. On the blog, she continued to write. Now, with more maturity and with more courage, she started signing her name. She began to be approached by people who wanted to tell their stories. She created an online space to support survivors of invisible traumas, and with the help of a local NGO, she gave her first talk in a public school. She talked about silence, about survival, and about what happens after everyone leaves. She trembled at first. He sweated, he almost fainted, but he spoke, and at the end, a 14-year-old girl was waiting to talk. She said quietly, "Thank you for telling me. Now I know it's not just me." Aline smiled. She knew she would still have difficult days ahead. She would still have to deal with the shadows, but now she had light. She had a voice, and she had purpose. The fall no longer defined her story. The choice to get up did. It was a grey morning when Aline received an invitation that would make her heart stop for an instant. A national TV program wanted to interview her, not to talk about the well case, but about the project she had set up to welcome survivors of psychological trauma. The blog had become a support network, with hundreds of accounts, virtual meetings, and even mental health volunteers. She hesitated. Exposure brought risks. The fear of being discredited came back like a ghost, but something inside her told her it was time. The week of the interview, she prepared everything calmly. She chose her clothes carefully. She carried a stone she had found at the bottom of the well in her pocket, kept as a symbol that she had survived. Backstage in the studio, her racing heart almost made her retreat, but then someone from the team approached her and said, "I read you. My brother went through something similar. You helped him." Aline smiled, touched. She took a deep breath, and she went in. During the interview, she told her story firmly. She didn't try to dramatize or hide the scars. She talked about the fall, the loneliness, the abandonment, but above all, she spoke of the aftermath. The silence that hurt her more than the hole in the ground, and of the choice she made to live, even when it seemed impossible. The presenter, visibly touched, asked, "And what would you say to someone who is today at the bottom of their own well?" Aline replied, her voice firm and sweet, "That you may think you're alone, but you're not. that it's possible to get out even when everything seems dark, and that no one needs to deserve love in order to receive it. The pain is not your fault, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. The program had a huge impact, but what struck Aline most was not the audience, nor the invitations that came afterwards. It was a letter. It arrived 3 weeks after the interview. No sender, handwritten. "I didn't know how to be a mother. It hurt me to listen to you, but I had to. I always thought that ignoring pain was protection, but I only learned to keep quiet. Forgive me for not listening to you. I'm trying to learn. I've always loved you, even if I didn't know how to show it." He just signed it. M. Aline cried like she hadn't cried in ages. It was her mother's. There was no doubt about it. She didn't run home. She didn't call. She didn't reply straight away. But she treasured the letter. In therapy, she read it aloud. For the first time, she felt that the past could finally begin to dissolve. A month later, she wrote a reply. Simple, true. "Thank you for listening to me now. I'm trying to learn too, one day at a time." Over time, they resumed contact, with limits, with care, but with affection. The reunion wasn't a perfect happy ending, but it was real. And that was enough. Aline continued her studies. She studied psychology. She turned her pain into a tool, her story into a path for others, and in an emotional lecture years later, she held the same stone from the well in her hands and said, "This is not a reminder of the pain. It's proof of the choice I made, the choice to live." Aline's story is not just about physical survival. It's about what happens when pain isn't listened to, when trauma is discredited, when silence becomes a prison. It shows us that the worst pits are not always made of earth. Sometimes they are made of unspoken words, absences, and averted eyes. The hole Aline fell into had an end, but the emotional hole she had lived in for years seemed to have no way out. And yet, she chose to get out. She shows that true strength lies not in resisting pain, but in allowing yourself to feel it, in seeking help, in speaking out, even when your voice is shaking, in saying, "That hurt me," even if the world would rather you kept quiet. Your journey teaches you that it is possible to start again, that it's legitimate to fall, that it is noble to get up, and that each person who decides to turn their pain into a bridge can save more lives than they realize. Aline didn't want to be an example. She didn't seek the stage, but by telling her story, she has become a beacon. She reminds us that there is life after the bottom, and that no one, absolutely no one, deserves to be silenced in their own pain. After the interview, the blog and her mother's letter, Aline's life took directions she would never have imagined. She finished her degree in psychology with tears in her eyes when she received her diploma. Every subject, every exam, every night studying was a small victory against the past that tried to silence her. She opened a psychological support center for young people in vulnerable situations. The name? Invisible Root, a tribute to that little plant that sprouted from the impossible on her bathroom floor. There, with a team of volunteers, she provided free care to people who were suffering from silent wounds. Aline didn't promise a quick cure. She promised to listen, and that was often enough. She wrote a book, an honest and sensitive account of her journey. She won awards, invitations to lectures, and recognition. But what touched her most were the anonymous messages, the shy hugs after the speeches, the stories that came to her like someone handing over a piece of their heart. Little by little, she reconnected with her mother. They didn't rebuild the past, but they created a truer present. Her stepfather left the scene, and Aline understood that sometimes justice doesn't come as punishment, but as liberation. Today, she lives in a small apartment with lots of windows and plants. She's still scared sometimes, but now she knows where to look for strength. And every day, before going to sleep, she looks at the wellstone she keeps on her bookshelf and smiles. How about you? Have you ever felt like you'd fallen into a pit so deep that no one else could reach you? Aline's story shows us that, however dark it may seem, there is always a way out. Not always quick, not always easy, but it is possible. Maybe you're going through something similar. Perhaps you know someone who is silent, screaming inside. If this story has touched you, share it. Comment below. What was the strongest moment for you? Or if you like, tell your own story. Sometimes, just by writing, we begin to heal. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell. Every week, there will be a new, real or plausible story that shows how human beings are capable of rebuilding themselves. Because here at The Weight of Choice, we believe that every pain can become a path, and you are never alone.